My name is Vardi. I'm presenting my work at the Martino Center for Biomedical Imaging at Massachusetts General Hospital, and today I'll be talking to you about my work with prodromal Alzheimer's screening using a seroreaction time trial. So, Alzheimer's disease is quickly becoming the defining disease of the 21st century. Not only is it the most rapidly growing disease in the United States, it's one of the few diseases around the world that's on the rise globally. And while other very important diseases such as heart attacks and cancers have shown declines in the past decades, Alzheimer's is at an all-time high. The problem is so significant that it's estimated that by 2050, as many as 100 million people will contract Alzheimer's disease. And almost half of those people will need nursing home or above level of care, which is not only expensive, but very difficult. The disease is so prevalent that 1 in 3 people in this room will develop one form or another of dementia, of which Alzheimer's constitutes between 50 and 75%. It's for this reason that it's estimated that by 2050, the cost of the disease will add $1 trillion annually to the American healthcare system. And the individual cost will be as much as $341,000 per person. Of course, economics is one thing, but the true cost of the disease lies in the families of those affected. Loved ones have to watch as their parents, their siblings, their friends lose control of who they are, forget their minds, and forget those who are closest to them. It's one of the most difficult diseases that we have facing us, and it's about to be a time bomb. So let's dive more into the disease and start understanding it. What you see on the left is a normal, healthy brain, and on the right, you have a diseased brain from late-stage Alzheimer's disease. As you can see, the damage is physically visible, and the neurological damage is not only extensive, it's also important to point out that it's irreversible. As of today, we have no way of taking a diseased brain and healing it back up to normal status. And while this might sound catastrophic, we actually have had great advancements in the last 20 years that have shown that the right combination of diet, exercise, and medication can not only slow the progression of the disease, but sometimes halt it altogether. The critical point to note, though, is that these treatment and therapy options are only effective at the earliest stage of the disease, what we would call mildly cognitively impaired, or MCI. And so the good news is that we're very good at diagnosing MCI. We have diagnostic tests that are extraordinarily accurate, but the problem is that they're very expensive and they are only available in select locations. Usually, you'll require a certified neurologist or a geriatric specialist to give you a cognitive assessment and then follow up with either a PET, MRI, CT, or transcranial Doppler scan. All of these are very expensive tests and can't be performed at all locations. And so the problem is that many Americans don't have access to these services. And around the world, this problem is compounded. It's for this reason that it's estimated as many as 75% of cases around the world go completely undiagnosed, let alone at the early stage. And so that's why we get statistics like this, that the time to diagnosis since the beginning of the symptoms is almost 3 years on average. This is a serious problem because people are not getting identified earlier and they're not being treated when it's actually effective. What we need to combat this problem is a new diagnostic solution. We need something that's accessible, that's cheap, and most importantly, it's simple enough to be implemented globally. And so this is where my research comes in and what I'm going to be talking to you about today. I've been looking at something called the seroreaction time test. And what this is, we'll call it SRTT for short. It's an impulse response measurement kit that uses randomized and repeated pattern stimuli to measure somebody's responses. So let me unpack that real quick. Basically, it's very simple. A subject is given a response test. They see a square on a screen, and they click the corresponding button to the square as quickly and accurately as they can. The genius in the test, however, is that these squares are presented to the subject in repeated and randomized forms, but they're done so that the sequences are long enough so that the subject can't really recognize that there's a pattern involved, but yet we see improvements over time in their scores. And what this shows us is that they're learning subconsciously. They're not aware of the patterns that they're learning, but they are, and we call this implicit learning. As it turns out, this area of the brain that deals with implicit learning, what we call the medial temporal lobe, has oftentimes been associated with one of the first parts of the brain to be affected by Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. So the hope of this study was to see whether we can use something like a seroreaction time test to gauge performance differences between people with MCI and cognitively healthy individuals. So here's what the test actually looks like. It's just 4 buttons on the screen, and this is all the subject sees, and the test takes 5 minutes. So let me introduce you to our subjects. We used 44 pre-screened, cognitively healthy, and MCI individuals. We normalized them for their age, their sex, their years of education, and their medical history. We then chose them to be as particularly similar as possible, most importantly, in their cognitive assessment scores. We gave them the Montreal Cognitive Assessment and the Mini Mental State Examination, and their scores were nearly identical. So the hope is, if you met these people on the street, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference between somebody who has mild cognitive impairment and somebody who's healthy. We tried selecting those at the earliest stage of the disease as possible. And so this is what we did. We gave them the test, we recorded their impulse responses, and along with their missed and incorrect responses, and then through a series of linear and multivariate regressions, we were able to identify some patterns of the data. So I'm just going to throw some data at your face. This right here is the raw data from the subjects. And what you might be able to see, you might be able to see the differences by yourself. The control subject on the left has an overall quicker response time to the stimuli than the MCI subject. They also exhibit less variability in their behavior, and most importantly, fewer mistakes when they're taking the test. And so what we did from there is we took these 3 very important metrics: average reaction time, variability in reaction time, and their overall accuracy. And we created, sort of like Hurrah's presentation, a median regression and separated the data. And so what we did here is we created a cutoff value, where if they performed better than the other group, they were placed, their scores were given a positive marker, and worse, they were given a negative marker. And then created this again for the other metrics. We then took all this data together, and using a weighting system that I figured out through iterative design, we combined it into a single proprietary performance metric that would predict the subject's cognitive performance. And our results were really surprising. Of our cognitively impaired MCI individuals, we captured 21 out of 23 of them. And while we only captured 15 out of 21, representing a 71% sensitivity, our overall accuracy came to 82%. Cognitive tests like this, even at their best, those expensive diagnostic tools I told you about, they're around 90% accurate. And so what this tells us is that there is something in this data from the implicit learning that we can actually take and predict somebody's performance. So of course, one test on one group is not representative of the whole, but a couple of other things that we did to bolster our analysis. I performed a support vector machine learning algorithm test on the data itself, and that brought us to a 91% accuracy. I should note that this should be taken with a grain of salt because oftentimes these computer programs don't account for overfitting, and they will choose a lot of unimportant variables to consider. But some other things that we did as well, I ran a permutation resampling on the data, meaning I fed the test fake data as well, and saw that our test was very unique compared to other tests of random data. On top of it, I created a variant data simulation metric that basically fed the test with very similar data based on the data characteristics. And over 10,000 simulations, we found that we also were arriving at an 80 to 90% range in accuracy. From what I can tell you, from this subject pool that we have here, at least with this subject pool, we're able to determine their performance and their cognitive health based on this 5-minute test. So what does this mean? Well, we're never going to be able to use this to replace current diagnostic tools. But in the realm of diagnosing Alzheimer's disease, there's a whole toolbox of tools that even the best medical centers use a variety of. And the SRT test that we developed at Mass General might fit into one of these toolset categories. What it could serve as is an early detection and classification test that would be able to tell you what your likely performance would be. And as a referral program, if it could tell you that you should probably go see a doctor, we've already done an amazing job of getting you that medical attention you need much earlier. The Alzheimer's Association has been recently quoted as saying that an early and accurate diagnostic could save up to $7.9 trillion over the next decade. The cure for Alzheimer's is much like the cure for cancer. We're never going to find one thing that takes care of it. But diagnostic tools are a big piece of that puzzle. Being able to identify and catch the disease early is critical, as with many other chronic diseases, in helping people gain back their lives. If we're able to identify people earlier and get them the attention that they need, we could add decades of cognitive health to those people. I want to thank the Martino Center for Biomedical Imaging, as well as Massachusetts General Hospital. Especially, I'd like to thank my principal investigator, Dr. David Salat, for heading this project. Rachel Alvarado was the person who gave our subject the test, and of course my partner Reed Lorimer, who helped me with the project. Thank you so much. Questions? Yes?
Did you look at just dominant hand? So was everybody using their dominant hand, or did you also look at non-dominant hand?
Oh, yes, I should reiterate. So the test was actually taking place with both hands. You had 2 fingers, each one on from each hand on 4 buttons, and basically just the corresponding button to the corresponding square on the screen.
Switch mapping like halfway through. So if you had 4 buttons, right, and so you could assume 3 and 4 were on the right hand,
yes.
And 1 and 2. Did you then switch it like halfway through?
No,
You might want to look at that because that might actually tighten up any variability that you have.
Okay, that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Definitely, thank you. Yeah.
When you used the support vector machine, you said you only had 41 participants. How did you split up the test and train data?
Oh yeah, so we had 44, and what we did is we actually took 10% of the data to train for the support vector machine, and then we did it again with 20% to be trained, and then 80 and 90 respectively to be tested on.
So what do you think are additional things that you could be doing to improve the accuracy of the overall predictability?
Yeah, so first and foremost, more subjects. The problem is, if that was easy, I would just do it myself, but of course, with tests like this, each one of our 44 subjects was given a cognitive slew of assessments. Each one went through more than 20 different tests, including all the expensive ones that I listed, and all the cognitive assessment, other tests that we gave them. So the reason we did that is to verify their status as MCI and to create a solid baseline. So we can't just take anybody who has Alzheimer's, and that's what makes studying this challenging. We need to be able to find people who have been identified early, which is already a rare case, and to be able to have them to participate and come in over and over and over again just to create this data set. So as soon as we can do that, I can guarantee you better data. Okay, thank you so much.